So welcome to the National Book Critics Circle Conversation about Translation with Maureen Freely, translator of the 2023 Barrios Book in Translation Prize winner, Cold Nights of Childhood by Tezer Özlü, and Mandana Chaffa, NBCC Vice President of the Barrios Book in Translation Prize. I'm Rebecca Hussey, NBCC Vice President of Membership and Technology and your tech host for the evening. So I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping details before I introduce Mandana, who will introduce our guest today. First, if you want to enable closed captioning and view a live transcript, click Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. You can click View Full Transcript to view the transcript in the side panel of the meeting. We also have Mylin Hill joining us and offering ASL interpretation. So thank you so much for being here, Mylin. We'll have time for questions and answers for our panelists, so please ask questions. If you have a question, you can use the Ask the Question box at the bottom of your screen at any time, so we can bring it into the conversation. So ask as many questions as you want and ask at any time. I'll be monitoring questions, and I'll also post relevant links as our panelists engage in discussion. So let's begin. I would like to introduce Mandana Chaffa. She is the founder and editor-chief of Nowruz Journal, a periodical of Persian arts and letters, and an editor-at-large at Chicago Review of Books. She serves on the board of the National Book Critics Circle, where she's vice president of the Gregg Barrios Book and Translation Prize and vice president of the Emerging Critics Fellow Program. She's also president of the board of the Flowchart Foundation, which explores contemporary poetry and the interrelationships of various art forms as guided by the legacy of American poet John Ashbery. Born in Tehran, Iran, she lives in New York. So welcome, Mandana.
Thank you so much. Hearing that about like two sentences in, I wanted you to stop talking so we could talk about Maureen. So thank you so much for the introduction, though, and all you do for the NBCC. And on a night that we're celebrating translation of all kinds, thank you, Mylin, so much for providing such an important function for us all. Everyone, I'm going to reiterate what Rebecca said. Please ask your terrific questions in the Q&A, not from me, of course, but from Maureen, and we will try to get to as many as possible. So on behalf of the National Book Critics Circle, as we celebrate our 50th anniversary, I am beyond thrilled to be here with you tonight and with our guest of honor, Maureen Freely. Let me read her impressive bio to you before we get started. Maureen Freely is a writer with 8 novels to her name and many other strings to her bow. Well known as a translator of the Turkish Nobel laureate Orhan Pamuk, she has also brought into English several classics and works by Turkey's rising stars, and obviously most recently Tezer Özlü's Cold Nights of Childhood, which was the winner of the 2023 Gregg Barrios Book and Translation Prize and published by Transit Books. We're going to have a link in the chat. If you haven't read it, you really should. For many years, she worked as a journalist in London, writing about literature, social justice, and human rights, and as chair of the Translators Association, and more recently as president and chair of English Pen, she has campaigned for writers and freedom of expression internationally, cause that is important to all of us. She teaches at the University of Warwick, which means sometime in the middle of your night, Maureen. I'm so grateful you're here with us.
It's wonderful to be here, and I feel really awake. Yeah,
yeah, especially after the brouhaha trying to get me on. Can I still congratulate you on the win? It's what, 6 months later? Can I say congratulations again?
It's so wonderful. Thank you so much. It was a big surprise of the best kind. Yes.
Terrific. So yeah. Why don't we just first talk about this book and how and when you came to translate Tezer's work?
The offer came to me in the beginning of the pandemic, during the lockdowns. We had more lockdowns in England than I think anywhere in the world. So there I was, and it was offered, and I thought, well, let's go for it. Yes.
Terrific. I was going to ask a different question, but because of what we were talking about in the green room, I wonder when you when you start a translation, are you starting directly at the beginning? Is it the sort of thing that you must do it chronologically? What's the process? Are you reading the book first? Are you thinking about the translation first? How do you get into it?
Well, I suppose I got an idea from my friends on the Translators Association. They had an idea that you should never do the same thing twice and try different things. And so I have tried different things, but what's most important to me when I'm translating a novel is or a short story is to understand the voice and really work hard to understand the voice. So generally it's the first pages I go over and over and over and over until I feel I've got inside the voice or underneath the voice or whatever preposition seems apt. Yeah. So and that was particularly a challenge with Tezer because she's doing some very tricky and wonderful things from the very first line. So she's changing tense, she's changing location. There's a deliberate disjointedness, and she does that in order to create a trance of her own, a trance not quite like any trance I've ever been in before.
And in a lot of ways, relaying in language so much that is difficult to express in language, with respect to
Exactly.
experiences in
Exactly.
life, normal, ordinary language doesn't necessarily provide enough texture. And I
Yeah,
think your translation does so well is to provide that texture.
it's a state of mind. And what my job as the translator is first to try to understand it and then to honor it. And I was concerned when I was working on it that I might be under pressure to clean it up a little bit because all these back and forth between present tense and past tense and first person and other person. If I'd had a insensitive editor, they would have just said, "Well, this is just too difficult for the Anglophone reader." But lucky for me, I was with really wonderful, editors on both sides of the Atlantic. So, yeah.
And actually, I like what you said because it underscores that there is really a market for this. People who don't think that there's a market for this sort of thing. There's obviously you and I are on the side of translation, more translation, more translation, but there really is a market for books in translation.
There is now. When I was starting out, I mean, I should say that I'd published, written and published most of those novels, or better part of those novels, before I went into translation in a big way, and it was really difficult going from Turkish into English, and there was so much prejudice, that sort of boring prejudice about translation. They would always tell me about, translator traitor, or are you faithful? Like I'm not a wife. I'm not a wife. I'm a translator, not a wife. And they would just wheel these things out one after the other, after the other. And then there was also, we can talk about it later. There was a lot of hostility on the other side,
Right.
As well. But you can expect that whenever literature is opening up into the world. So a lot of the things that we started doing at the Translators Association, in constant conversation with the American Literary Translators Association, and in conversation with any publishers and editors and librarians. Librarians are really important, and universities who are interested in the same things that we were, and literature festivals, and also book fairs. And like, to our kind of gobsmacking surprise, it's actually worked. I think one of the things that translators are good at, they're good at talking to everybody who's involved in the business of bringing interesting, challenging, ambitious literary books. And so we somehow managed to connect a lot of people with a lot of other people And then I think you see an audience being, or audiences being cultivated and curated and cared for. So I think that's probably the interest was always there, but it just it wasn't being attended to, and it wasn't being cared for. And now it's opening up, and it's really wonderful. There's a real curiosity whenever I do events, particularly in the US, I have to say. Yeah, there's the desire to know more about the rest of the world, not just what's going on in the contemporary world, but what's happened historically.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, since you brought it up, you started doing your own writing. What took you into, I know that I hope you'll talk a little bit about your experiences in Turkey, but what made you say, okay, I'm going to start doing translation? Probably because, as you said, right now there's I think we're in a golden age of translation.
Yeah.
But in those days, I have a feeling there was a bit of a struggle if that you wanted to become a translator.
Well, it's not, I mean, it's still not the one and only thing I do. I still write my own fiction and nonfiction, although and what I write and in fiction and nonfiction uh, has its roots in translation as well. Yeah, so everything is bound up with everything else. Now, as somebody who was born in Tehran and moved to the US, you may not be surprised to hear that I began translating from the first day that my family moved to Istanbul. And New Jersey girl, 8-year-old, picked up the languages through which we were traveling. And suddenly I was just put on duty to translate for my family. And I quickly found out that translation was not just about the surface meaning. It was about keeping the peace, right? And
Yeah.
also being very, very sensitive to all of the different tensions that were going on that neither side seemed to respect in the other. Yeah.
And then being young doing that, I have to admit that I wrote in a piece just recently about the fact that I've been translating ever since I was 5 years old. Not
Exactly.
necessarily translating well. I mean, I'm not trying to talk about quality per se. But yeah, that's so you moved from New Jersey to Istanbul. Uh,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
heck of a move.
So what happened is, yeah, my parents were both from Brooklyn, and they both wanted to get out of Brooklyn, and so my mother only agreed to marry my father if he promised to take her around the world. And so he went and became went to college. First of all, he'd been in the war, so he was GI Bill, and then he uh, got into NYU as a physics graduate school, and we were living in Princeton, where he was working for Project Matterhorn, which was connected to the Institute for Advanced Studies. And when he got his PhD, which took a long time because by then there were 3 children. If you've ever seen the film or read the book Revolutionary Road, you know, the couple who never get to Europe because they drink too much. Well, we got to Europe. and, and, uh, and so by then, well, there was no family money. So the idea was to go around the world in jobs. And my father heard from other people around the Princeton campus that there was an American university in Istanbul that was very beautiful. And so he applied for a job there, and we went, and we were supposed to stay there 3 years and then go to the next place and the next place. But my father fell in love with Istanbul, and he tried to leave a number of times, but he could never stay away. And my parents both rest in the corner of a very beautiful old cemetery for long-term Christian residents. He was an atheist, but still qualifies as a Christian.
I have to say, that's your next novel right there. That's absolutely next novel right there.
So yeah, so that's how we ended up there. And you know, they were children of the war. It was the Cold War, and so there was never much of a future. It was always we'll stay a little bit longer, we'll stay a little bit longer. The world's still going on, yeah. And during that time, we traveled a lot. So um, I I picked up Greek before I ever really got a sense of Turkish. We were living on a campus in which all the students were Turkish, but classes were in English, and the faculty was mostly American. And I would hear Turkish everywhere, and really, I was studying French in school, and so I was interested in it was like the big mystery, trying to figure out what people were saying. And I couldn't figure out where words began and ended. I now understand why that was the case. In Turkish, words don't necessarily end or in the same place because it's agglutinative, all those suffixes. And also the students, they're always very nice to me and my sister and brother, but they said, why would you want to learn Turkish? It will never be useful to you. So
Well, I understand that. You know what? In those days, I'm thinking about we're relatively similar in age. French was supposed to be useful. English was supposed to be useful. I understand what was considered a useful language versus a
yeah,
not useful language, right?
yeah, except that
And
in
these would have
Greek,
been useful. I mean, I really wish I could do that when I was young.
yeah.
That's a useful line. I have to say though, I laugh a bit because your parents left Brooklyn and they ended up and then into New Jersey and they went to Istanbul. My parents left Brooklyn and we went to Long Island. I mean, I'm looking at the difference in our life. I need to talk with them about. I mean, they were daring enough to come here, but
I
maybe.
mean, Long Island is really beautiful, actually. I only went to visit Long Island recently, and I thought, but nobody told me how beautiful it is. Yeah. But the other interesting thing is that my daughter
Yeah,
now lives really close to where my parents were born, and so we've come full
we've
circle.
come full circle. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
So you're in school, you're learning Turkish. You're learning Turkish because at the time you want to write in Turkish, you want to read in Turkish.
I didn't learn. I mean, I was trying to learn Turkish, but I didn't. So I was going to an international school um, for mostly American kids, and then when I got to high school, lycée, as we called it there, I moved over to the American College for Girls, at which I was one of two Americans. Actually, the first year, I think I was the only one, and um, and it was against the rules, against the law, to speak anything but English on campus, which meant that every time the teacher left the room, everybody spoke, went back to Turkish. And that's when I learned Turkish by eavesdropping. And and then I also wanted to know, I acquired a boyfriend who had lots of friends, and I wanted to know what they were saying about me and about everybody else. So when I did, and I had a grammar book at home, which I would listen to mysteries and not know what they were, and then I would look it up at home. I was studying Latin again at the same time, and the understanding of Latin um, complex grammar was very helpful in looking at the complex grammar of Turkish. And when I really could understand pretty much everything the boyfriend was saying to his friends, I decided not to let them know. That was very good. Yeah.
One of
And there
the
was one
best reasons to learn another language, my friend, is just to be able to overhear people who would be surprised
yeah.
that you know their language.
So the one time I was at a disco, those are the years when discos are be all and end all. And I was sitting with my boyfriend, and so I was very clearly a foreigner. Okay. So some casual acquaintance came up and said, "Oh yeah, there's this girl," and then he said, "Sıcak mı soğuk mu?" Which means, is she hot or is she cold? and, and so I just blew my cover at that point. I said soğuk, which means cold.
Best reason in the world to learn another language.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, I know you speak Turkish, German. You've also translated in and out of German. Is it different? Is there a different feeling with different languages when you're translating?
I don't I haven't I've tr translated a bit from French. I did study German and Spanish, and I could if I, if there were a gun to my head. Yeah. Um, my closest brush with German translation recently was the second Tezer, Özlü, the novel that she wrote just before she died, poor thing. And she wrote it. She had gone to a German lycée in Istanbul, and she wrote the first draft of this novel, Journey to the Edge of Life, in German, and then she translated it herself into Turkish and changed it a lot. But for various reasons, they gave me a copy of the German typescript, and so I was going back and forth between the German and the
How's that?
Turkish.
How was that? Like, was she, I think about Sam Beckett, who wrote in French, even though English was obviously his, look at me calling him Sam. English was his first language. How was it in German versus what it was in?
Yeah, I don't know. What I want to do is show the TypeScript to a German friend of mine, a colleague of mine at the university. I can't assess what her German's like, whether it's schoolgirl German or whether it's doing interesting things. I can't tell. I know that the German the German literary world has been very interested in and inviting to writers coming into German out of Turkish and other language. I think Japanese, I think is another one. So what they appreciate most about the Turkish writers coming into German, like Sevgi Emine Özdamar is kind of the most famous example, is that they're doing something. They sound different. And they're writing Turkishly. So I don't know whether she's writing Turkishly in an interesting way or not. The I've always maintained with my students, because I teach writing but also translation, that if you can translate yourself, why not? And I keep saying to people, you just don't have to obey your own sentences. You can change them. You can rewrite, you can redraft, you can reimagine. And that is certainly what she does. The journey to the edge of life is about, takes place after cold nights of childhood, when she has declared independence from anybody who is going to try to hospitalize her or so-called cure her of her ups and downs. And so she is independent, and she's going to take care of herself. And so she's on a mega high, and very lonely in Berlin when she finds out that she's reading a biography of Cesare Pavese, who's her famous sort of favorite writer of all time. And she finds out they have almost the same birthday, and she gets it into her head, for reasons she doesn't explain, to go and visit the birthplaces and graves of the three writers who have kept her alive in her view. The first being Kafka, second being Svevo, and the third being Pavese. And it's also, so she's going around, like night trains through, Eastern Bloc to Prague, and then other night trains elsewhere. And what she's really trying to do is kind of map, not just her state of mind, but the landscape of her mind, if you like. She's really wants to live. She so wants to live and enjoy life and enjoy beauty, but she's haunted by the fact that Pavese committed suicide at about the same age as she had at the time. The book ends with her going to the room where he did commit suicide, and she just has to run away. So she that's the end of the book. But what happens is she goes back to Berlin, and she writes the German right away. And so when she translates it into Turkish, it is a year or two later. And so she is rewriting it in a very considered way. She's no longer in that frame of mind, and she's kind of shaping it and trying to understand it. And she leaves out lots and lots of scenes.
How, I should know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it because I don't. Was Cold Nights of Childhood a success for her before she wrote this
Yes,
kind of
yes,
sequel, so that this was what engendered the sequel for her?
yes, yes. And in fact, she had won a fellowship. She'd become uh, known outside Turkey as well. She was already known for her short stories, and she was already very much in the world, in the writers' world in Istanbul, which um, Istanbul is big, but the world of the Bohemians is really small, and it's exactly where we lived and where we went. So I know that we were in the same, cafes and restaurants, and we certainly in the same parts of the city. And the house that she had in the last years of her life, it's just basically, I don't know, it's a 15-minute walk from where I grew up. She is buried in the cemetery right across the street from where I grew up. Um, so so she's very close to me in that way. But I digressed. So she was very well known in that world, and then she wrote Cold Nights of Childhood, and it made her name. And it was particularly embraced by women who were living very constrained lives. Why am I putting it in the past tense? Living very constrained lives, and she kind of unlocked them. I mean, there's one of the things that I've really noticed when translating women as opposed to translating men is women have to, the battle is in their bodies. There's so much control. They have they have to play it out. They have to break free.
There's a physicality to
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And in your translation of Cold Nights of Childhood, there is a physical. It's not all interior,
Yes,
although it's a very interior set of
yeah,
stories and all. It's still there's a lot of physicality to it. Do you
yeah.
feel so? This is your second book of hers. The first one I cannot imagine translating that without feeling a certain amount of emotion toward all of it and toward
Oh,
her.
oh,
How
oh.
did it feel to
Yeah.
revisit her in actually in a more emotionally challenging book?
So the first one, it's basically I'm in there. I'm with Cold Nights of Childhood. I'm in there, and she unlocks it for me. By then, but she's there. There are certain points in the book when she gets out, and she's more interested in. She talks about her various incarcerations, but really she's interested in how the world looks, how Anatolia in particular looks when she gets out. She's always looking out. There's no self-pity. And there's no real anger for all the people who tried to help her. I think she understands that she was kind of hard to help. And also, she's free, so she can, sleep with any guy she feels like sleeping with. She's like such really interesting things to say about sex and finding out about sex. And she has a particular talk about feeling like they're in the scene in the room. The older man who is her protector when she and her best friend start going out at night, and the person who is always there to greet her whenever she gets out of a hospital was one of my father's really good friends.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, yeah. And he used to, his name was Oz the ghost, Hayalet Oz. And he used to always come to, my parents were very famous for their parties. And so he used to always come to the parties. And he would always steal some of my father's books. And so every time he came in, my father would take him to the bookcase and said, here are a few more, have a few more. And he would translate them. Okay, so anyway, so that is the very, very strong connection with her, and that with the journey to the edge of life. It's my late husband had some of the same issues as we, because I'm refusing to name anything
Right.
because she doesn't, and I'm not going to. But he had the same sorts of ups and downs, and I had to live with that, on the side. But this time I was inside, and so it was a revelation. It was an education, and it was exhausting because I was both understanding what she was going through and what she was trying to convey the whole time she's going on this journey. She has this terrible toothache, and she puts aspirin on it, but she won't do anything else. And I keep on saying, Tezer, go to my thing. Go to what you know. And she's always aches and pains and so on. But the in that sort of very, very being inside her head as well as her body and seeing the world through her eyes, I was also remembering how I used to feel being alongside that kind of roller coaster, and realizing what I hadn't understood. So it was very, very doubly intense, if you like.
What you're underscoring is something that I think I see more in modern translation or contemporary translation. I don't want to use the word modern because that has a lot of different connotations. Is that back to what you said earlier about kind of this word for word translation? Now I feel there's a lot less about making sure that's the exact word they meant, and more about the feeling, the underlying meanings in the text, or what the author was trying to convey, rather than a specific word which could lose emotion with it. And I feel that not only what you're saying now, but it's a sense I have in a lot of contemporary
I
types.
think, when I was in college and when I was studying literature, it was poetry was always the first place I went. I don't write poetry, but I think poets have understood this about translation for a very long time. And it's just been, it might have been the, attitudes of the, the great translators, the great old, Constance Garnett or whatever, and so on. The surface remains really, really important. But I think that what I try to do, and I think a lot of other contemporary translators try to do, is you go through the surface, way underneath. You try to understand how, how, not just how the author might have been feeling, but what kind of artistic effect they were trying to create, and how they were deploying everything we can do with words, not just word by word, but just everything we can do with the music, everything we can do with rhythm, everything we can do with the just simple sound of words, and then also, but it helps to be a novelist, actually.
You said that to me the other
day. It's not the only, and it helps to be a poet. And there's lots of ways into translation. I have the friends who are just wonderful translators who are not novelists, but they somehow find their way into the depths, if you like, and then they come back to the surface. We come back to the surface, and then we look at the surface and say, is that anything like what we began with? And often the answer is not really, and then we have to start again. But it's a lot of people, a lot of my students are just the sentences as far as they go, and they get really caught up in.
Well, we have some good questions that I want to relay to you.
Okay.
But I wonder, and this is because I'm the age I am, I wonder if some of that also comes with experience. This
yeah,
go a little bit deeper or at a different level.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't know, but I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I could never have been equal to Tezer's book earlier on. It would have been very difficult because the artistic effect, you would say, is so complex, and it's breaking so many rules in order to create a new kind of unity. So that would have been hard. There's some other uh, writers I've translated who've giving me some interesting headaches or got me caught in the first pages for a very, very, very long time. Um, but I just had occasion to revisit the first full-length translation I ever did, and that there's a story there. If you can bear, shall I tell you the story?
Oh yeah, tell us the story, and then I'll have the questions. Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. So I after college, and I was incredibly pretentious college person, and then came to London and became a very bad secretary because that's the only kind of work that women could get in the mid 70s. And so fortunately for me, I kept on getting fired as well. So I ended up at Amnesty International, where it was a time when they just used whatever skills you brought. So I was doing a bit of translation of some very, very important depressing accounts of prison and torture. And uh, a professor of constitutional law who was on the international executive, came to dinner, and he brought two books by his wife who had recently died, who was a well-known writer in Turkey, and he just said, "Could you translate them?" And I read them, and they changed my life. The two books together. But the first one is the one I translated when I was pregnant with my first child, and it's an account of her year in a political prison in 1971. And that's I've just sold it
Oh
46
wow.
years later. 46 years later. I carried it around with me. Nobody, they said, "Oh yeah, it's interesting," but nobody's interested in Turkey, whatever. But I just love the book so much because of what it is, and also because of what it is to me and what she taught me about Turkey, about politics, also about the possibilities of female solidarity, very much in this prison. So think I have moved since then. I think I probably have moved 36 times, but I've always brought it with me.
And from
And
let me check.
and finally, I showed it to an agent who works out of Turkey, and I sent her a scan. I never heard anything more of it, and then I found out that she'd sold it.
Which actually tells our audience do not give up. Don't give up.
Well,
I
don't give up. If you
But it's
love
the
it,
right time. Something has to come to fruition for.
yeah.
First, let me tell you, the poets in the crowd really love your, one of our dear friends and board members, Iris Dunkel, said, love the insights about poetry and translation, which of course, as you know, I do as well. Um, One of our members, Britta Strohmeyer, asked two really good questions. She says that as a German native, I'm intrigued by the German copy of Journey to the Edge of Life. Is it publicly available?
I'm not sure it is.
Yeah, I don't think from what you said it is.
I mean, I have the German typescript from Tezer's sister, who gave it to the agent in Turkey and who sent it to me, and I know it won a prize, and I can actually send to you the details of that prize.
Thank
I
you
don't
very much.
have
We'll
it,
share that.
and that may be a way of finding it. The complication with this, and one of the reasons I was going back to the German typescript so much, I'm quite proud of myself that I could remember enough. But, it's interspersed with a lot of quotes from Pavese, but there are no footnotes, and so I was trying to trace them,
Oh,
and
so
that
you
was kind of
like an
difficult.
archaeological dig to some extent,
Yeah, it
right?
was like many archaeological digs. It's never finished. So,
It's
but
too.
I was trying to go because I think she was translating from Istanbul being a city where nobody notices what language you're in. You just go from one language to the next, usually in the middle of a sentence, because you just assume people are going to understand. She never mentions where she, not only she doesn't footnote them, but as far as I know, she didn't have Italian, so she was always translating from the German,
Into.
reading in the German. Yeah.
Britta also asked a good question about, you talked about understanding the voice of the source text, and of course that includes rhythm and tone. How do you manage when there's a kind of disconnect between the sound and the voice? When you can't, and she's preempting one of my questions for you, so I don't mind asking it now, especially when you cannot consult with the author. I really would love to know what it's like for you when you have a living author versus someone who you only know almost as a ghost, right? In absentia.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
absence of the presence that you're focusing on
yeah.
with someone like Tezer.
Well, mentioning no names is not always a great thing for the author to be living.
I,
Okay.
no, no,
Yeah.
no, mentioning no names.
I mean, it's just basically because there's all sorts of separate issues, and one is about control, and if particularly there are a lot of people, um, writers who have English, but maybe not quite enough, or not quite nuanced enough, so that it can be very difficult. Um, the I've mostly, even with other living authors I've translated, I've not been too much in touch. One was very, very helpful, and we had interesting conversations and found interesting solutions. But usually, I'm on my own.
It actually makes a lot of sense to me, to be honest with you, because you're creating something a little new.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you have a certain authorial, you know,
yeah.
power.
You
That's why we
have
want you on the front page. We want your names on the front page of the book because the translator matters, not just the translation. The actual translator matters.
Yeah, a translation is an interpretation. Just and in that sense is ephemeral. Yeah, it's just there always can be other interpretations, and if it's an interesting book that lasts, there will be. Yeah. Uh, Going to that question that going back, is there when there is a difference between the the voice and the tone? Is that what it
Yes,
was?
yes.
Okay. What I thought of at that point was a really, really difficult first page. And in a book by Hassan Ali Toptash, who is very kind of secret Sufi. He does where basically he's Alevi, and so there's this whole religious system that is very secret in Turkey, and it's not very, but it's very much there. And it's a lot of twirling, a lot of shakes, a lot of paradoxical wisdom, and so on. It's absolutely entrancing. But the first page of this one novel of his is about sort of it takes place in an apartment building that seems to be coming apart at the seams. And it's full of, like Turkish, there's a lot of onomatopoeia,
Mhm.
which is really hard to translate. And, uh, and and I just didn't know what to do with it until suddenly it occurred to me that what he was doing is that it was the orchestra getting ready before the concert, and that kind of dissonance or whatever, and then the lights dim, and that's actually what happens in that first in that first page. He was doing a concert of dissonance, yeah, and so the challenge was to give that dissonance, but also have a flow to it, because the Turkish has a flow to it, even though with all this dissonance in the middle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand.
So I don't know if that answers the
Well,
question. Yeah.
actually, it leads into a question that Hannah Bonner asked. She's one of our Emerging Critics Fellows. And I think you're leading to this answer already, which is what's your personal process for piercing the surface in your search for emotional truth of a text when you're translating?
Uh,
If I
yeah,
can add to that, how do you
sure.
not lose yourself in the process?
I do. I do. I
You
do.
know what I'm saying? Like, because when you were
Yeah.
talking about Tezer's book, it's a very intense life that she was leading at the time that she was writing about. And how
Yeah.
do you not
Yeah.
entirely
Well,
assume yourself
I
in that?
do. I do absolutely lose myself, and that is a perilous state. And um, but I also lost myself when I had children. I lost myself one time too many when I fell in love as well. So I have this problem anyway of, negative capability, whatever you want to call it. If I didn't write my own stuff, I don't know what I would do. I mean, that's how I find myself again. And there's definitely a conversation between translations and whatever I do between translations. Um, and the whenever I leave a translation, I feel very free, very, very free. And I can do whatever I want. And of course, once I'm inside I've created my own little house of fiction. I realize, oh, it was nice to be in somebody else's. But the main thing is I learn so much by living inside these other books and living inside them for a long time. Translating time is so different from reading time. And
How many things are you working on at the same time, if I may interrupt? Are you,
how,
you work on
I'm
multiple
always, I
translations?
always have I always have a novel going. I'm a very slow novelist. Right now, I'm working on a long essay that's turning into a book on. It's really um, how and why I became a translator and how it became me. So it's very much. I mean, it's because of all of the traumas that have to do with politics and my position as an American in a country that was becoming very anti-American for reasons that I totally could sympathize with, but didn't want to take the blame for, but feeling responsibility, knowing that so many of my contemporaries ended up in the political prisons, such of the type that Sevgi Soysal wrote about in that book I love so much. So that's what I'm writing. I'm trying to put that puzzle together. So the main thing that I've learned by being in these translations and losing myself in them, you get lost in them, but it's contained. It's like, it is. I'm lucky. All these books are wonderful. It's beautifully constructed, and so I know I won't get totally, totally, totally lost. But it's positioning. Because if I'm in Turkey, I'm a foreigner, and I carry the legacy of all the Americans who came before me and all the ones who came after me, and that really limits what I can understand about the country the country of my heart, if you like. Whereas when I'm translating, for the length of time that I'm translating, I am I'm part of the air. I'm part of the air, and so I just really understand things differently. As an example, or to illustrate that, when Orhan, my then friend, called up and said, "I need a translator. Could you give me 2 months? And, I need you to do Snow in 2 months." And I said, "Yeah." and, uh, uh, but I knew what I wanted to do with it, so that was fine. I was in the middle of a book about a political murder that a number of my classmates were implicated in 1971, 72. And the novel is not what happened, but what might have been, what could have been, what should have been. And the Turkish contemporaries in this book just wouldn't talk to me. That the Americans would ask them questions, and they would, because they all smoked. And by the time they'd exhaled all the smoke, they would have thought of a way not to explain anything. But when I stopped that in order to do Snow, to translate Snow, and when I went back to the novel, I didn't have to ask them. I understood, and we didn't have to talk about it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense to me. And in fact, you are so prescient. It leads into something that one of our wonderful people who's in the audience said, Amir. So he is from Iran, and one of the things he wanted to ask about was, you had mentioned that translation is not just about keeping surface meaning, which
Yeah.
is true, which I'm trying to paraphrase this. So because of the way things are around, you can't translate anything you want to, since there are political and cultural issues that you have to adhere to, if not
Yeah.
just outright censorship.
Yeah.
So he was wondering if you've ever faced these issues, mostly the cultural issues to be considered when translating. Do you still deal with any sort of, not censorship, obviously, but ramifications or consequences with what you translate and how you translate it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's,
Great question.
I mean, yeah, thank you. And that's a question that comes out of an understanding of what it's like to live in a place where you don't, where you're very aware of what you cannot say. The as far as translating stuff that is dangerous in Turkish, I think that's what you mean. I mean, if not, ask the question again. When I was growing up, we all knew, and I knew even when I was 8 or 9, that if any of us mentioned not even the Armenian genocide, but the Armenian massacres, okay, because that we'd get kicked out of the country right away, and that if anybody was Turkish, with they be could go to jail. It was so there was a lot of terror around any discussion of this. And meanwhile, we were growing up, you know, the town I was growing up on the Bosphorus was very, you know, it was part Armenian and part Greek, and very, and they were very, very worried for their safety all the time. There was a large Jewish community in the city, which and that community was also very much represented in my school. So I grew up around minorities who kind of had a backpack, who knew that their lives could end, felt very, very endangered. And I very much felt that as well. So when Orhan got he alluded vaguely to the Armenian genocide. He didn't even call it that. Then, which was a movement that was opening up inside Turkey at that time, you know, to educate citizens of Turkey about what had happened. And Orhan himself was not very active in it, but he had a lot of friends who were. So he was almost killed. The leader of the kind of the charismatic leader of this movement, Turkish Armenian journalist, was killed, assassinated right in front of his office. And so I just felt I owed it to the people I'd grown up with and around, to translate what I could out of this movement into English. I knew that it would never get a review, but it would end up in libraries. And so I translated 2 books by feminist oral historians, the testimony of Islamist, the grandchildren of Islamicized Armenians, because there are many millions of them who got taken into families in good ways and bad. And I also translated the biography of Hrant Dink, who was the journalist who was assassinated. So that was
There's a responsibility to it.
that was not appreciated,
Yeah,
but
no,
I
because I sense the responsibility, and in a way, there's kind of a sacred thing you're doing, right? Because translation allows people's stories to get told to a wider audience.
yeah, and I felt like when I was translating them, I felt like we were in a very dark room together, and they were whispering their stories to me, because almost all of them told their stories under pseudonym, because it was still so dangerous to have this as part of your legacy, because it's such a nationalist country. I don't think I took that many risks myself, except when during the time when Orhan was being prosecuted and hate campaigned, and I was doing a lot of journalism about the deep state. And that was the time when I felt like maybe I had gone too far.
You know,
But
You say that beautiful sentence about these people whispering to you, and you tell me that you're not a poet. And I'm just going to push back a little and say, you could try a little bit of poetry.
I could, I
You could
could,
try. You
I
could
could,
try.
I could. I work
Between
with poets.
between
Yeah.
all of this stuff, who would that harm? May I ask you to read a little bit from
Sure,
the book? For
sure.
those who've read it, they're going to enjoy it, and for those who haven't read it, they're going to want to buy the book.
Arriving at the village, I have no thoughts about leaving. I'm cut off from time itself. I wake up to the sound of waves and go straight to the shore, where a fresh, humid morning awaits me. Water droplets on all the flowers and plants that can grow along the Aegean. The sand still damp from the night. I walk along the beach. The seawater is clean, white foam spreading over the sand, thousands of little bubbles melting into the wet sand, until another little wave washes over it. My thoughts are clear. I open myself up to the fullness of life. Some days there are floods of rain, floods of Aegean rain that still take me by surprise. I'm sitting in the restaurant reading. Some books take me to worlds far greater and more tender than real life. Toward evening, the rain lets up. I walk to the village. I drink wine in the fish restaurant. The village is still empty. No one's come on holiday yet. The villagers are watching television in their coffee houses, drinking sage tea. Then I want to be in love again. He has the bluest eyes. It turns into a passion. I pour into it all the love I have ever felt for others, all the love I have in me. It's as if I am living all my loves, past and present, with this one man. And now I am sitting on the top steps of the ancient theater by the bay's still waters, waiting for the colors that the rising sun will bring to the mountains. As I watch his little car go down the empty road to vanish between the fields and the temples, I think how strange it is to feel as if I am watching my past and future loves unfurling before me. Life is full of passion. This we know. The more you come to love life, the more your recognition of death grows and evolves. The beauties of life win. If I can bid farewell to this love with such ease, then I can do the same just as beautifully to life. I can embrace love and at the same time let it flow away like a gentle breeze, like the Aegean.
That's utterly beautiful. And I would not dare to try to add another question to that because it is so gorgeous. And we'll leave it there, knowing that we could talk for probably hours and hours and never feel like we're done. I really can't thank you enough for joining us and for this beautiful translation of a book and an author that we wouldn't, English speakers at least, wouldn't know otherwise, and for spending so much time with us tonight to talk about it. I've told you this more than once. It's such an honor to be involved with this prize, to serve the membership of the NBCC, and to engage in conversation with someone like you, who support not only the authors that you're writing about, but the amount of support that you show translators as well all around the world. So also tremendous thanks to Mylin Hill for translating this event live. And if you're interested in translation or criticism of any kind, I do encourage you to become a member of the NBCC. Membership confers a variety of benefits, including the opportunity to vote for the winner of the Barrios Book and Translation Prize in the late winter, as well as, of course, the John Leonard Prize for Best Debut. I hope for our audience members, you do join us in those conversations. It's one of the most rewarding things that we get to do is to commune with all of you, who, as you can tell from these questions, are really brilliant about the work that they do. Some of them are translators, many of them are poets and other kinds of writers. We also have a variety of terrific in-person and virtual events coming up, celebrating books and authors, and of course, our 50th anniversary. Please do feel free to contact the great Rebecca or myself for more information. Thank you so much for spending some of your Wednesday night, or in Maureen's case, your Thursday morning with us. I'm so sorry. You are so much more eloquent at your time of night than I'm at my time of night. And I'm going to sign up and think about how much better I could have been.
I just want to say it's a really wonderful organization at NBCC, such seriousness of purpose, and such an interesting group of people you brought together. So it's a real honor to be honored. Yeah.
We're so lucky to have you, and hope to see you on our screens again. And as far as everyone in the audience, wishing you and yours peace and safety wherever you are. Good night. Thank you so much.
Good night. Good night.